Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here for another movie review. Today, we're going to be talking about the recently released News of the World. The film is directed by Paul Greengrass, written by Paul Greengrass, Luke Davies, and stars Tom Hanks, Helena Zengel, Tom Astor, Andy Kostelik, Ray McKinnon, Mare Winningham, Jeffrey Ware, Chris Bilsma, and others. The plot synopsis is a Civil War veteran agrees to deliver a girl taken by the Kiowa people years ago to her aunt and uncle against her will. They travel hundreds of miles and face grave dangers as they search for a place that either can call home. So yeah, I mean that plot synopsis is actually not super accurate. It's half accurate. So the character Tom Hanks is playing, what's his name here? Captain Kidd, Civil War veteran. But what he does is he goes from town to town and basically reads the newspaper. Everybody goes in, they put in a couple cents in a jar. They go to a bar or whatever, a restaurant. They go to a hotel and they sit and they listen to Tom Hanks, Captain Kidd, read the news. That's why it's called News of the World. Like that's his mandate. He wants to spread the news. Now I understand, like it's like a thinly veiled allegory for modern times and about the importance and the sanctity of the news and the people that write the news and the people that deliver the news. It's almost kind of like an argument for punditry. Even though he doesn't add his own kind of flavor text to it, he just reads the news, but it kind of reads that way, quote unquote, in the modern context. And I do definitely think that was part of probably why this project was put into action. So just off the bat, I actually really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was very sweet and thoughtful, like another one of these kind of solid adult dramas. It would make a great double feature with a movie that I reviewed a while back called Let Him Go, which is kind of a neo-Western, kind of modern, or somewhat modern. It's a little bit of a period piece, but this would make a good double feature with that. This place takes place, turn of the century, just post-Civil War. He's going through kind of the frontier. You go explore the frontier and the dangers of the frontier and all the things that come with that. It's a nasty, hard, harsh world to live in. And when he has this little girl that was, obviously kidnapped by these Indians or Native Americans, and she's kind of a savage child, and he's kind of bringing her along with him. And it just happens by circumstance. He doesn't want to do it. Like, they just won't take her, and he just feels obligated because he's a man of integrity. He's a good person. So he takes her along with her, and as they're traveling, he does what he does. He brings the news to the world. And it ends up being kind of treacherous. Some people want this little girl for very, very nefarious means. Like there's a sequence, which is probably the best sequence in the movie. It's kind of this extended sequence in the middle of the movie where these guys see this little girl and basically want to buy her from him for prostitution. And she's a little girl. She's like, 12 years old probably. And he obviously doesn't want to do that. And they kind of like hunt him down. And there's this great kind of protracted, but very intense shootout scene that takes place, and he keeps running into kind of these obstacles as he's going, trying to bring this girl to her parents, but also trying to keep kind of the integrity of his mission and his mandate about delivering the news. And not like there is literally in this movie, there is literally a Trump stand-in. There's this guy who's kind of like this rich dude. He's taken over this town. He's a piece of shit, and he's publishes his own newspaper, a little bit like William Randolph Hearst Trump type of thing. And he wants this dude to read from his newspaper because his newspaper, he controls the information. And Tom Hanks' character has to kind of have this crisis of morality or ethics or whatever you want to call it about like, well, should I just read this propaganda basically, or should I deliver the news, the real news? And he picks a story about these miners that like is inspiring to the town. And I guess they kind of revolt because of it. Again, underlining this kind of theme of the importance of the news and those who deliver it, and the effect that it can have on a culture or people, just to let other people know that they're not alone, that they're not the only ones that feel that way. There's all these things happening in this larger world that we live in that we just don't know about. Honestly, in a weird way, and this was not their intention, but it is true. It kind of does map onto what the news is supposed to be. And in the modern era, when you see how the news is kind of become literally fucking government propaganda, no matter what side, no matter what you're watching, It is some sort of form of propaganda for a party. It's much more heavily on one side than the other, but nonetheless, it is across the spectrum of politics. And how damaging that is to society and people. We're living through it right now. This isolation that everybody feels, this information isolation, where people make hard and fast decisions based on very limited information. The info war, if you will. So the movie, it touches on that. It just does it in a way that it doesn't realize that it's touching on it, because it's very clearly in one direction. I mean, fuck, Tom Hanks hosted the inauguration day party, So I think I know where he lies. Another movie that kind of did this, it was a couple years ago, also a product of the Trump era, was Steven Spielberg's The Post, with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks playing real world people, telling a story about the Washington Post, I think, right? And that movie is super on the nose, super heavy-handed, so heavy-handed that it undermines itself, and it's sycophantic and gross. This one is much more subtle. I think it's much more successful because in 10, 15, 20 years, when this has kind of this scenario that we're all living has kind of faded from the zeitgeist a little bit, and people have more perspective, this will be able to play without needing that other information. Whereas something like The Post is really grounded in a place and time. It's making a particular point about the world that it was made in. Where this feels like it could be more universal because the parallels are not as direct. This is director Paul Greengrass. If you know who Paul Greengrass is, he's kind of came to fame with United 93 in 2006, and then he got into the Jason Bourne business. He did a couple, The Bourne Supremacy, The Bourne Ultimatum, Green Zone. He actually, and Jason Bourne, the Matt Damon joints. He did one that I actually really, really love with Tom Hanks called Captain Phillips. It's an excellent kind of true life thriller, fucking intense, edge of your seat, real docudrama type deal. And Tom Hanks probably gives the performance of his career in that movie. So they were definitely work very well together. But the most surprising thing I would say about News of the World relative to Paul Greengrass is that he's very low key here. He's much more mannered. It's, if you don't know, he's like kind of famous for shaky cam fighting and really intense, like zooming in and zooming out and kind of trying to give it that documentary feel. Here, he takes much more of a naturalistic approach to the way he shoots the movie, or he wanted it to be shot, rather. I'm not actually sure. Let's see if we can find who the cinematographer is, because they did some great work here. And the production design is also fantastic. Dariusz Wolski. Production design by David Crank. What a name. David Crank. Jesus. What else has Dariusz Wolski done? Let's see what he's done. He's done The Martian. He did Prometheus, Sicario, Day of the Soldado. Crimson Tide. He's a great cinematographer. I really like his stuff, actually. Yeah, he's worked with Ridley Scott a bunch. Cool. He does good work here. It's a really, really well shot movie. And I think, the reason I noticed that so much was because of Paul Greengrass. Like, I just know about Paul Greengrass. I know I'm familiar with his filmography. So I just kind of expected a certain aesthetic, a certain style. And this was way more cinematic, I guess you would say. It really, really does a great job. It looks naturalistic, but it also is patient and takes its time. In a way, it's not as, kinetic. Which is sometimes, Greengrass is known. He kind of goes overboard sometimes. Not everything needs to feel like it's a fucking guy with a handy cam chasing a character, So that was not here, and it left an impression because it wasn't. So that was cool. But yeah, I don't know if I would pay $20 to see this. I actually saw this a while ago when it was in the theater. Matinee price a couple weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago. So that's when I came to it. I wouldn't pay $20 for the at home theaters and home VOD price. But as soon as this thing ends up on a streaming service, or when it drops in price, when you can get it for $5 or $6, totally recommend it. It's a solid movie. It's a very solid drama. Pulled on my heartstrings a little bit, Anything that deals with like children in peril. Ever since I had a kid, is something that I immediately kind of just like gravitate towards, and I'm just like, and it draws me in, and it breaks my fucking heart. Breaks my heart. On a recent episode of Nightcap, I watched this old documentary called Child of Rage. And, while I was watching it, I was just kind of taking it in. But, like, after the fact, like, since then, I've thought about it a ton. Interesting. So, if you want to check that out, I'll link it at the end of this episode. So, it's like towards the end of the episode of Nightcap, which is like a live series that I do where I go watch internet videos and just talk and give commentary, and we have a good time. Monday nights around 10 p.m. You should check it out. It's a live show. Come to the chat. Enjoy yourself. But yeah, this was a solid movie. Very solid. Happy I watched it. Don't know if I'll ever watch it again, but time well spent, I'd say. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox and everything that Zoobox is about, this channel, everything that happens, there's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for Twitter. Also, if you'd like to see something in particular, you heard this commentary, you like this review, you want to hear what I have to say about something specific, leave it in the comments. I'd appreciate it. And also, if you saw News of the World, what did you think of News of the World? Curious to hear what people think about it. Honestly, I have not read any reviews of it or anything. Just shooting from the hip, busting from the gut, telling you what I think. All right, everybody. You have the best day ever.